Every civilization has had great crises, wars, epidemics, economic collapses, but there is a smaller kind of crisis, one far quieter and, honestly, one few people want written into history books. It usually happens after a very private moment. Someone stands up, walks behind a rock, and the brain sends a signal to your head, it is time. After finishing your business, you look around, and then realize you still have to deal with the rest of the problem. Not hunting animals or building a shelter, just figuring out what to clean with. It sounds too small to be called history, but it is exactly little things like this that show how people really lived. Because history does not only happen on battlefields or inside palaces, it also happens behind bushes, beside streams, in public toilets, among city sewers, inside royal courts, inside paper mills, and finally, in a brightly lit room where you only need to reach to the side. A roll of toilet paper sitting quietly seems like nothing great until it disappears. Right at that moment, all of modern civilization suddenly feels much thinner. This crisis begins at the smallest level, a body and the environment around it. Before toilet paper, humans did not have one universal answer. They had the ground, trees, and water. They had snow, moss, and smooth stones. They had whatever happened to be nearby. And more importantly, they had the ability to judge very quickly what could save their dignity, and what could turn an ordinary morning into a painful memory. The easiest answer was often leaves. Leaves were everywhere, looked soft, and seemed harmless. It almost seemed as if nature had left them there, as a free service for humanity. But nature does not provide customer service. Plants did not evolve to care about human comfort. After using the toilet, many leaves really were soft, but many others were rough, with irritating sap, with tiny stinging hairs, or with surfaces that made the body understand at once. The choice just made was a mistake, and so, from a very simple need, humans had to learn the first lesson. Not everything in the natural world can be used. A leaf is not just a leaf. It is a test. Choose correctly, and everything ends quietly. Choose wrongly, and the whole tribe may gain another story, passed down by word of mouth, and very hard to forget. No one needed to write a botany book for that experience. To spread, all it took was one person trying the wrong thing, one very convincing scream, and a few witnesses. From that day on, some plants were removed from the list of things to use in situations that were private. This is how knowledge began. Not formal, not clean, but very effective. Humans learned which plants were edible, which healed, which were poisonous, which caused itching, which plants should be avoided, in every sensitive situation. Before there was toilet paper, the important thing was not only the material, the important thing was communal memory. But that little crisis did not stop at leaves. It changed according to geography. If people lived near water, they had another solution. Water did not need to be soft. Water did not need to absorb. It did not need to be rolled into a 3-ply product. Water only needed to do what it always does, carry away what should not remain. That is why many cultures, from ancient times to today, consider washing with water cleaner than wiping with paper alone. Not because it is strange, very possibly. They were looking at the problem more practically. In cold regions, snow could become a forced option, not exactly pleasant, but clean, available, and guaranteed to wake the user up immediately. In damp forests, soft moss could be more reliable than leaves. In farming regions, crop byproducts could be reused. In coastal areas, smooth things from the sea sometimes also join the list of solutions no one wants to describe in too much detail, so it was the same problem. But each environment offered a different answer. There was no generic ancient person. Some people lived by rivers, some lived in forests, some lived amid ice and snow, some lived in dry places. Some had many options, some had only a bush, a little luck, and a decision that had to be made very quickly. At this point, it was still a personal problem. If someone chose the wrong leaf, that person suffered. If someone found water, that person was cleaner. Someone living where there was soft moss might feel blessed by nature. But then humans did something that changed everything. They began living close together. Villages appeared, cities appeared, more bodies were closer to one another, more meals, more waste. And suddenly, the little crisis behind the bush became a much larger problem. The issue was no longer just cleaning the body. The issue was how to keep waste from coming back to kill the whole community. One person could go behind a bush and walk away, and nature could handle part of it. But thousands of people in one city were different. Waste does not disappear. Just because humans look away, it seeps into the soil, it flows into the water, it attracts flies. It carries parasites, bacteria, foul smells, and disease. From that moment, hygiene was no longer a private matter. It became infrastructure. The Romans understood this in a very practical way. They built sewers, aqueducts, and public toilets. Those places certainly did not match the spotless image that modern people would want, but the idea behind them was very important. A city, and that wants to survive, must control what bodies release every day. This is the less poetic part of civilization. A city may have temples, laws, stone statues, straight roads, armies, forums, and powerful speeches, but if dirty water and waste are not handled, that city is poisoning itself from the ground up. And in that Roman picture, there was one object that often makes modern people pause. A sponge attached to a stick, often mentioned in the context of public toilets. One stick, one sponge, one shared space. And very possibly, a concept of sharing that makes us today feel a little more grateful for our own age. But on closer inspection, that object was not just a shocking detail. It shows humans trying to turn a bodily need into a process that could be managed in a city. There was water for washing. There were tools to use, sewers to carry things away, and a system, though still very far from modern hygiene standards. The little crisis had grown one level larger. From the individual body, it entered urban engineering. But even when cities learned how to handle waste, another question remained: who got to be cleaner? This is when hygiene entered the world of class. Because human bodies are the same in their basic needs. Everyone eats, everyone digests, everyone has to deal with what is left, but society rarely treats bodies the same way. The wealthy often had cleaner water, more private space, better materials, and servants to preserve comfort and discretion. A poor person used whatever was available: leaves, straw, old cloth, water if there was any, or whatever material the environment and circumstances allowed. It was the same biological moment, very equal in nature. Yet society still found a way to create differences. One person could use something soft, another used something rough. One person had privacy, another had to manage in a crowded space. One person had the conditions to call cleanliness a standard. Another could only call it luck. Then paper entered the story, not immediately, as a miracle for all humankind. Paper was invented very early in China, but the use of paper for hygiene is more clearly recorded from around the 6th century onward. In the imperial court, there was even toilet paper made, specifically soft and even scented for the royal class. This detail sounds almost modern. It was not enough to be usable. It had to be soft, not just clean. It had to be worthy of status. In the same world, some people still had to choose among leaves, moss, water, smooth stones, or local materials, while in a palace, someone was already using paper made specifically for their own comfort. The toilet paper roll was not yet common everywhere, but a new idea had appeared. Hygiene could be manufactured, prepared, refined, and divided by class. Cleanliness was no longer only dependent on what you found around you. It began to depend on technology and your social position. The little crisis had now entered the economy. And when mass production appeared, everything changed scale once again. Modern toilet paper did not just replace leaves, moss, snow, stones, or sponges. It replaced randomness. Before that, the result depended on where you lived, what season of the year it was. Whether you were rich or poor, whether you had water, whether you knew which plants were dangerous, and whether you were lucky enough that day. Industrial toilet paper turned a moment, once full of variables, into a standardized action. Reach over, pull some paper, done. That very simplicity is what makes it invisible. The most successful inventions often turn a major problem into something we no longer have to think about. Lights come on when we press a switch. Water flows when we turn a tap. Paper is there when needed, until it is not, one empty roll at the wrong moment, and all of history immediately comes rushing back. Modern people begin looking around the room with the eyes of their ancestors. What can be used? What should not be used? Is there any option that will not make me regret it? At that moment, the smart apartment, high-speed internet, the phone, the bank card, food delivery services, and artificial intelligence all temporarily step into the background. A very ancient problem stands up in silence. So, before toilet paper existed, what did ancient people use? The short answer is many things, but the real question is that they used the entire world around them. They used plants, water, snow, moss, smooth stones, local materials. They used the experience of those who came before. They used memories of mistakes. They used sewer systems. When cities forced them to think on a larger scale, they used paper when technology and production allowed it. And finally, they used modern industry to turn a little crisis into a product that fits neatly on a supermarket shelf. A leaf is not just a leaf, it is botanical knowledge. A stream of water is not just a stream of water. It is geography and the habit of cleanliness. A public toilet is not just a place to answer nature's call. It is proof that urban life had to learn how to live with waste. A soft sheet of paper is not just paper. It is technology, commerce, standards of living, and the distribution of comfort in society. History often likes to tell stories about lofty things: pyramids, castles, warships, thrones, great inventions, kings, and battles. But human life is also shaped by things lower, smaller, dirtier, and repeated every day. Humans did not become civilized because we escaped our bodies. We became civilized because we learned to deal with those bodies less painfully, less dangerously, less randomly, and less dependent on whether we happen to pick the worst leaf in the entire forest or not. So, the next time you pull a strip of toilet paper from the roll, maybe you will not think anything at all. That is exactly the privilege, a very small, very everyday privilege, but behind it is an entire long road. From prehistoric bushes, through water, through moss and snow, through Roman sewers, through paper in the Chinese imperial court, through modern factories, and then to the room where you only need to reach to the side. Do not underestimate an invention just because it sits beside the toilet. Some things, the more ordinary they are, the more they prove how far civilization has come.